The Extraordinary Rendition of Janos Farkas. Chapter 22. His legs rebelled at the idea of standing. His back cringed at the thought of sitting up. Janos lay on the floor, the cold, hot blood of his swollen back against the cold, damp, concrete floor, listening for a sound that would force him to move. He flexed his fingers. They had not yet worked on his arms and hands. When would that happen? Today? He smiled, not out of irony, but only to prove to himself that they had not yet attacked his face either. Why? One blow from the hose could easily break his jaw, crush a cheekbone, disfigure his nose forever. The visible parts of him, the parts that were not hidden by clothing, had been left untouched, unmarred. Why? The answer he gave himself bore the fantasy of hope. They didn't want their handiwork visible. Visible to whom? Who was coming to see him? Ein? She was American. Had she gone to the media? Americans still believed in the media. Mohammed Haidar Zamar was in Far Philistin for several years before the German government got involved, and that was only because a writer for Der Spiegel started doing articles about him. But how would they even know he was there? What media would be interested in him? He heard Mustafa's cell door open, the creak of a cart. His door was next. The shit bottle. Breakfast. Like an actor who can transform his character into someone else, his body played its part and transformed itself into a standing position. Homo erectus. His door opened, and Mustafa went by him to change the shit bottle. "I have money," Janos said to the guard so softly that even Mustafa could barely hear it. "Enough money for you to live in luxury the rest of your life." Only a slight shift in the eyes indicated that the guard had heard him. Janos waited for the blow that would be the answer from an honest, fearing guard. None came. "Money," he said softly over Mustafa's bent body as he put the rancid yogurt breakfast on the floor. "Money, women, cars." And as the guard closed the door, he added, "Live like a king." The lock clicked, and Janos sank to the floor, no longer able to play the part. He stared at his food. It was intolerable, but he overcame the urge to push it away, dipping his fingers into it and scooping some into his mouth. He no longer thought of it as food, but as strength, and he had no intention of giving up his strength to the point where he could not act when the time came. And he was sure the time would come. Sometimes they took him to the interrogation right after breakfast. Sometimes they waited until the afternoon. Sometimes they came in the middle of the night. He lay there, his guts in a turmoil of rancid yogurt, waiting for what would come. His mind drifted off to a place where he had never been before. It was warm, comfortable, and wet. And then he realized that diarrhea had oozed from him and he was lying in his own warm wetness. Filth. When the guards came, they hauled him to a bare concrete shower where he found a bar of lye soap that stung his abrasions. He winced at the water's coldness and his swollen muscles stiffened. He put on clean clothes, waited for the bag to be put over his head, and for the guards to lead him into darkness. The bag never came, and as the guards let him out, he studied the details of his subterranean hell. The gray paint, the dreary light bulbs and metal cages, doors without windows, walls without windows. In the elevator, he noticed that it needed no key to operate it, and there were 5 buttons. The guard pushed the 3rd button, but they only went up 1 floor. That meant there were 2 more above them and 1 below. He could not imagine a hell deeper than his own. The floor they got off at had nothing to indicate whether it was now above or still below ground. All he knew was that it was the floor of his interrogation room. The smells that he had memorized while blindfolded were there. The hum of the fluorescent lights and the thickness of the tiled floor. His legs started to collapse and he willed them on, knowing from memory's count that there were only 14 more steps to the room. The room was not as it was. The 2 large floodlights flanking the mirror were there, and the chair in the center was there, but there was also a heavy wooden table with straps in the middle and both ends. It looked to be on a swivel so that it could tilt. There was a watering can, such as one might use for roses, daffodils, or potted azaleas, on the floor. Near it was a filled water bucket. The guard took him over to his chair, strapped him into it, and left. He was alone in the room. In the other room, Max said to Spencer, "Well, just let him sit there and stew for a bit. See what he does with his face. Bite his lips, lick them, frown, whatever. These are the face movements that are natural to him, unforced and subtle. You'll need to learn them." Janos sat there listening and waiting. For what, he wasn't sure. This was new to him, being in the room without Abbess and Harb. Being in the room with the overhead lights on and the 2 floodlights off. Even the guard that stood inside the door was not there. He swiveled his head around, looking from side to side and up and down. There was nothing to see, nothing that he had not seen in the first few seconds of entering the room. And yet, there was something invisible there, something the naked eye could not pick up, but the mind's eye could. It was terror. It was fear. It was despair. It was hopelessness. It was all of those things all rolled into one giant ball of desperate reality. He tried to counter by imposing his own vision. The number 8 came into his head. 8 what? 8 why? He had played Hamlet on 8 different stages. He had played Macbeth on 7. One more stage was needed for Macbeth. Upon this one, he said to himself, upon this solitary stage of terror, I shall do one more Macbeth. His lips formed the words, but his voice remained silent as the soliloquy flowed through him. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps into this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, breathe candle. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. He thought of 8 different ways he could deliver the soliloquy. He thought of his favorite foods and had to stretch the list to grow it. 3 or 4 would have been easy. So his mind searched for an 8 that he could be happy and honest about. It was Ein. He thought of 8 ways he loved her, 8 ways he had made love to her, 8 things he would say to her if she were with him now. The thoughts made him smile, a sappy, crooked smile with the left side of his lower lip drooping more than the right. The shape of the smile did not go unnoticed. "What's he thinking of?" Max asked. "Ein," Spencer Elliott replied. "Now that I've seen her stuff, it's what I would be thinking of too." The door to the interrogation room opened. The guards entered. Then Harb. Then Abbess. Janos turned his head to look at them. "What are they going to do today?" Spencer asked Max. Max answered, wiped the smile off his face. That's the end of chapter 22. Tomorrow, chapter 23.